In a small, sun-dappled village where time seemed to slow down with the gentle passing of each day, there lived an old couple whose love had been the kind that people spoke of in hushed, reverent tones. Their names, whispered on the lips of villagers and passed down in family tales, were Eleanor and Thomas. Their story was not one of youthful passion that burned quickly and faded in the light of maturity, but rather a slow-burning flame that had warmed and illuminated the dark corners of their souls over many, many years. I remember vividly the first time I heard their tale. It was as if the air itself grew thick with the bittersweet aroma of memories, regret, and the inexorable march of time. Eleanor was a delicate woman with eyes that had witnessed the wonders and sorrows of life. Her hair, once the color of midnight spun with silver threads, had softened with age into a graceful cascade of white that framed her gentle face. Thomas, on the other hand, was a man whose strong features and deep-set eyes belied a tenderness that few had ever glimpsed. Together, they had built a life that seemed to be a tapestry of small, shared moments. A gentle touch on a cold morning, a knowing glance over a cup of tea, a silent promise made every time their hands met. Their love had been a silent symphony, played out over decades, whose melodies had both soothed and haunted them. Their meeting had been a twist of fate that could only be described as destiny. In a world brimming with chaos and uncertainty, their eyes met across a crowded market one autumn day. Eleanor had been selling handmade scarves, each one woven with stories of her own heartache and hope, while Thomas was passing through the village on a journey of rediscovery. It was a brief moment, a flash in time, yet it held a promise that neither could fully grasp at that moment. As the seasons turned, their encounters became more frequent, and the villagers began to speak of a gentle miracle taking place before their very eyes. Love, in its purest form, had blossomed in the most unassuming way, setting in motion a series of events that would shape the rest of their lives. In those early days, everything was bathed in the golden light of hope. The couple shared dreams and whispered secrets under the starry canopy of the night sky. They spoke of distant lands and forgotten times, of hopes and ambitions that seemed to stretch as far as the horizon. Their laughter was like music, filling the quiet lanes of the village and drawing smiles from even the most hardened of hearts. Yet, as the years passed and the seasons cycled in their eternal dance, shadows began to creep into the edges of their idyllic life. It was as if the inexorable weight of time had subtly altered the contours of their bond, adding layers of unspoken tensions and uncertainties. It began with small things, a glance misunderstood, a word left unsaid, a fleeting moment of silence that carried more meaning than either of them had intended. Eleanor, always the more sensitive of the two, often found herself reading between the lines of Thomas's occasional reticence. His once effusive declarations of love had slowly dwindled into quiet affirmations, spoken with a tone that sometimes suggested a deeper, unspoken sorrow. Thomas, meanwhile, was grappling with his own inner demons. The memories of a lost past, of battles fought and dreams abandoned, often resurfaced in his quiet moments, leaving him distant and reflective. The gentle murmur of their everyday life was punctuated by these invisible fissures, which, though seemingly harmless, grew into unbridgeable gaps with the slow inevitability of a winter thaw. One fateful evening, as twilight merged with the soft glow of lamplight, a misunderstanding unfolded that would forever alter the course of their lives. It was a night when the wind whispered secrets through the narrow alleys of the village, and every rustling leaf seemed to carry a hint of foreboding. Eleanor had been waiting for Thomas, who had promised to return after a brief errand in a neighboring town. Hours turned into an eternity, and the silence that filled the space between them was heavy with unspoken worries. When Thomas finally arrived, his eyes were shadowed with a weariness that made Eleanor's heart flutter with concern. But as they sat down to share a modest meal, a single misinterpreted word set in motion a cascade of sorrow. Eleanor had mentioned, in a voice laced with anxiety, how she had heard a rumor about Thomas's past, a fragment of gossip carried on the lips of a stranger, a tale of a love lost and a promise broken. In her trembling tone lay not an accusation, but a cry for reassurance, a desperate need to know that the man she loved was still the same, that the bond they had nurtured over so many years was unassailable. Thomas, however, interpreted her words as a subtle betrayal, a suggestion that his past might somehow diminish the sanctity of their shared present. His face hardened, and in that fleeting moment, the warmth that had long defined him seemed to cool, as if the chill of misunderstanding had seeped into his very bones. The ensuing conversation was like a storm gathering strength, a tempest of hurt feelings and misinterpretations that left both souls battered and bereft. Words, once tender and affectionate, became sharp and laden with regret. Each sentence was like a tiny fracture, deepening a rift that had been silently widening. Eleanor's eyes, normally so full of gentle understanding, glistened with tears that reflected the flickering candlelight, while Thomas's gaze grew distant and pained. Neither spoke of the true depths of their fears. Instead, they traded barbs and half-truths, each convinced that the other had betrayed their sacred trust. As the night deepened, so too did the chasm between them. The misunderstandings, once isolated and fleeting, now wove themselves into the fabric of their shared existence, creating a tapestry of sorrow and regret that threatened to engulf them both. Eleanor's heart ached with the weight of unspoken apologies, and Thomas's soul was tormented by the relentless echo of his own misgivings. It was a slow, inexorable descent into a darkness where light and hope seemed to be mere memories of a bygone era. The silence that followed was not the comforting quiet of peaceful coexistence, but a void filled with the ghosts of love that once was, a silence that screamed with the echoes of lost dreams. In the days that followed, the village itself seemed to sense the change in the couple's demeanor. Neighbors who once greeted them with warm smiles now exchanged worried glances, and the laughter that had once resonated from their little cottage was replaced by a pervasive melancholy. Eleanor tried desperately to mend the rift, reaching out with gentle touches and soft-spoken words that spoke of love and forgiveness. Yet, every attempt to bridge the gap was met with the cold distance of Thomas's retreat. He walked the narrow lanes alone at dusk, his silhouette a solitary figure against the vast expanse of a darkening sky, burdened by the realization that something irretrievable had been lost. The misunderstanding grew roots that no amount of tender gestures could uproot. It seeped into every conversation, every glance, every silent moment that they shared. The once vibrant dialogue of their hearts was now a series of hesitant, halting words that carried the weight of regret. Memories of happier times, of sunlit afternoons spent in quiet companionship, of whispered promises made beneath a canopy of stars, became bittersweet relics, a reminder of what had been and what could never be again. Eleanor's eyes, once bright with the hope of endless tomorrows, now held the resigned sorrow of someone who had seen the inevitable unraveling of a cherished bond. Thomas, too, was caught in the labyrinth of his own making, tormented by the realization that pride and misunderstanding had driven a wedge between him and the one person who had truly understood him. There were moments, however, when the old echoes of their shared past would break through the fortress of silence that had come between them. In the quiet moments of early morning, when the first rays of sunlight crept through the dusty windows, Eleanor would find herself lost in reverie, recalling the laughter and warmth that had once defined their union. In those fleeting instants, the bitterness of misunderstanding seemed to melt away, replaced by the tender remembrance of days when they had been inseparable. But as the sun climbed higher, reality would assert itself, and the fragile hope of reconciliation would vanish like mist in the morning light. The turning point of their tragic tale came unexpectedly, on a day that seemed no different from any other. It was a morning like many they had shared before, with the village awakening to the soft hum of daily life. Yet, beneath the surface of mundane routines, a storm of unspoken words and unresolved grievances had been building for months. Eleanor, feeling an overwhelming sense of despair at the distance that had grown between them, decided to take a walk along the winding path that led to the old oak tree, a silent witness to the many seasons of their love. As she wandered beneath the sprawling boughs, her mind was a whirlwind of regret and sorrow, every step a painful reminder of a love that now seemed irretrievably fractured. Meanwhile, Thomas remained at home, his heart a tangle of conflicting emotions. The silence in the cottage was deafening, every room echoing with memories of laughter and whispered endearments that now felt like distant echoes from another life. He sat by the window, watching the world go by with a heavy heart, each passing moment a reminder of the chasm that had come to define their existence. In his solitude, he wrestled with the realization that his own pride and stubbornness had become the architects of their downfall, that the misunderstanding, however small in its inception, had grown into an insurmountable barrier, a wall that separated him from the one person who had always been his guiding light. As the day wore on, fate intervened in a manner as tragic as it was inevitable. Eleanor, lost in thought beneath the ancient oak, encountered a figure from her past, a friend who, noticing the sorrow that clung to her like a shadow, tried to offer words of comfort and encouragement. In the soft murmur of their conversation, Eleanor's heart was laid bare, and she confessed her deepest fears and regrets. It was in that moment of vulnerability that her friend, with eyes filled with compassion, suggested that perhaps the misunderstanding could be cleared if only Thomas knew how deeply she yearned for reconciliation. However, the words spoken in that conversation were later twisted by the winds of rumor and misunderstanding, spreading through the village like wildfire. Whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs blossomed into accusations, until what had once been a private pain became the subject of public discourse. Thomas, upon hearing the distorted accounts of Eleanor's feelings from well-meaning but misguided villagers, was overcome with a sense of betrayal so profound that it shattered what little hope remained in his heart. He had, in his solitude, already begun to question the sincerity of the words and actions that had once bound them together. The realization that the one person who had given him unwavering love might have, in her moments of vulnerability, been swayed by the treachery of gossip, filled him with an unbearable grief. In his isolation, he could no longer distinguish between the echoes of truth and the poisonous whispers of falsehood. The seeds of doubt, long dormant, sprouted into a bitter harvest that left him reeling with sorrow and regret. As dusk fell upon the village, the couple found themselves in a confrontation that was as heartbreaking as it was inevitable. In the quiet of their modest home, where every corner held memories of shared joy and mutual understanding, Thomas and Eleanor faced each other with tear-filled eyes and hearts heavy with despair. There was no anger, no fury, only a profound, soul-crushing sadness that spoke of dreams unfulfilled and a love that had been corroded by the slow poison of misunderstanding. In that final, shattering exchange, both poured forth their hearts in a torrent of words that were as raw as they were painful. Eleanor, with trembling lips, tried to express the depth of her longing for reconciliation, for a return to the days when their love was pure and unblemished by doubt. Thomas, his voice barely a whisper, confessed that the pain of betrayal, real or imagined, had rendered him incapable of seeing the woman he once adored. The climax of their sorrow came in the form of an almost silent farewell, a mutual decision born out of the realization that neither of them could bear the weight of the past any longer. In the midst of their tearful exchange, with the wind outside echoing the mournful cadence of their final moments, they agreed, without a word of protest or hope, that it was time to part ways. It was as if the very fabric of their existence had been torn asunder, leaving behind only the ragged edges of a once beautiful tapestry. The decision was made not out of malice or hatred, but from a heart-wrenching understanding that sometimes love, however deep, can be extinguished by the smallest spark of misunderstanding. In the days that followed, the village was shrouded in a palpable grief, a collective mourning for a love story that had been as enduring as it was tragic. Eleanor wandered through the empty corridors of their home, every room a shrine to memories now tainted by sorrow. She clung to the fragments of a love that had once promised an eternity of happiness, even as the bitter truth of their separation gnawed at her heart. Thomas, meanwhile, retreated into a solitude so profound that it seemed as though he had become a ghost, a solitary figure whose only company was the relentless echo of his own regrets. The life they had built together, one filled with shared laughter, quiet dinners, and the simple, enduring pleasure of companionship, was now reduced to nothing more than memories etched in the silent walls of a deserted home. As time passed, the pain of their separation did not recede, but instead transformed into a constant, ever-present ache. Eleanor found solace in the gentle embrace of nature, often retreating to the old oak tree where she had once felt so close to the pulse of life. There, she would sit for hours, letting the soft rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the village lull her into a state of bittersweet reverie. She recalled the first time Thomas had whispered words of love under a star-studded sky, the way his eyes had shone with an inner light that seemed to promise eternal devotion. Yet, every memory was tinged with the shadow of what had been lost, a reminder that even the strongest of bonds can be undone by a single, fateful misinterpretation. Thomas, in his solitude, sought refuge in the silence of the night. He would walk the deserted lanes of the village, his steps echoing in the darkness as he tried to outrun the ghosts of his past. Each footfall was a reminder of the distance that now lay between him and the woman he had once cherished above all else. The weight of regret bore down upon him, a constant companion that no amount of solitude or reflection could dispel. His heart, once a wellspring of hope and passion, had been reduced to a barren landscape where every thought was haunted by the memory of Eleanor's gentle touch and the warmth of her smile. And so, as the years waned and the shadows grew longer, the old couple drifted further apart, their lives becoming a series of solitary journeys marked by silent mourning and the endless echo of what might have been. The love they had shared, once a vibrant flame, had been slowly extinguished by the unyielding forces of pride, miscommunication, and the relentless passage of time. The misunderstanding, a single, fateful moment that had spiraled into an avalanche of sorrow, had robbed them of the chance to find their way back to one another, leaving behind only the ghost of a promise that could never be fulfilled. In the twilight of their lives, the memory of their love lingered like a bittersweet melody, a haunting reminder of the fragility of human connection. Those who had known them spoke of their tale with a reverence that bordered on the sacred, as if the story of Eleanor and Thomas were a parable of both love's transcendent power and its heartbreaking vulnerability. Their once shared home, now abandoned and overgrown with ivy, stood as a silent monument to a love that had been as deep as it was tragic, a place where every creaking floorboard and every ray of light was imbued with the echoes of laughter, whispers of promises made, and the lingering sadness of dreams unfulfilled. I have often thought about how, in life, even the most enduring love can be brought to its knees by the tiniest of misunderstandings, a single word, a fleeting gesture, or an unspoken doubt that festers and grows until it becomes an insurmountable chasm. The story of Eleanor and Thomas serves as a solemn reminder that love, though capable of extraordinary beauty and joy, is also fragile and susceptible to the wounds inflicted by pride and miscommunication. It is a tale that teaches us that every word matters, that every moment of vulnerability is a chance to either heal or harm, and that sometimes the echoes of the past can shape our futures in ways we never imagined. In the end, their story did not conclude with a grand, sweeping gesture of reconciliation or a dramatic reunion. Instead, it faded quietly into the background of a world that continued its relentless march forward, leaving behind a legacy of both hope and heartbreak. Eleanor, with the tender sorrow of a heart that had loved deeply and lost profoundly, eventually passed away beneath the old oak tree, the very tree that had witnessed the birth of her love and the slow disintegration of her happiness. Her final moments were spent in a peaceful solitude, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she recalled the beauty of a love that had once filled her entire being, even as she whispered silent apologies to a man who could no longer hear her. Thomas, too, met his end in the solitude of a long, cold winter, his body succumbing to the ravages of time and a heart that had grown too heavy to bear the weight of regret. In his last days, he found solace in the quiet memories of happier times, the soft echo of Eleanor's laughter, the gentle warmth of her embrace, the way her eyes had sparkled with unspoken promises. Yet, even in those final moments, as he lay alone in the darkened room of their once shared home, the painful truth remained. The misunderstanding, though born of a single, fragile moment, had irreparably severed the bond that had once seemed unbreakable. Their passing was marked not by public fanfare or grand displays of sorrow, but by the silent mourning of a few who had been privileged enough to have witnessed their love. In the wake of their departure, the village was left with a lingering sadness, a profound understanding that even the strongest love can be undone by the cruel hands of fate, miscommunication, and the inexorable passage of time. The old cottage, now silent and overgrown with ivy, became a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand the delicate balance between love and loss, a living reminder of how even the gentlest hearts can be shattered by the smallest fissure. I often recall the words of an old villager, whose voice trembled as he recounted the tale. They loved each other with a passion that could have moved mountains, yet it was the tiniest spark of doubt that set their world ablaze. And in that tragic blaze, the pure light of their love was consumed, leaving behind only ashes and the haunting memory of what might have been if only a single word had been understood differently, if only a moment of vulnerability had been met with unwavering trust rather than suspicion. So, as you sit here and listen to the echoes of their story, a tale spun in the gentle cadence of a bygone era, remember that love, in all its splendor, is as fragile as the gossamer thread of a spider's web. It demands care, understanding, and above all, the courage to trust one another even when the shadows of misunderstanding loom large. The story of Eleanor and Thomas, though tragic, remains a timeless testament to both the beauty and the peril of human connection, a reminder that sometimes even the most enduring love can be undone by the smallest whisper of doubt, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow that echoes through the corridors of time. And now, dear listener, as you allow this tale to settle into the quiet corners of your heart, take with you the lesson that in every moment of misunderstanding lies a choice: to nurture the fragile flame of love with kindness and forgiveness, or to let it be extinguished by the relentless winds of pride and silence. For in the end, the true tragedy is not that love is lost, but that its light, once so brilliant, can fade away in the absence of trust and open hearts. Remember Eleanor and Thomas, not just as figures in a long-forgotten story, but as living embodiments of the delicate, bittersweet truth that even the strongest bonds can break under the weight of unspoken pain. Their legacy, though marked by sorrow, is also one of enduring beauty. In every whispered memory, in every gentle reminder of a love that once was, there remains a spark of hope. A hope that perhaps, in another time or another place, understanding and forgiveness might prevail over the cruel misunderstandings that so often steal away our most cherished treasures. And so, as the gentle light of dusk fades into the quiet of night, let the memory of their love serve as both a warning and an inspiration. That in the dance of life, every step matters, every word counts, and every moment is an opportunity to mend what has been broken before it is too late. In the silent, unyielding march of time, the love of Eleanor and Thomas stands as a monument to the bittersweet reality of human existence, a poignant reminder that even the most beautiful symphony can be marred by a single discordant note. Their story, woven into the fabric of the village and the hearts of those who remember, remains an eternal testament to the fragile power of love, the heavy burden of regret, and the enduring hope that even in the deepest of sorrows, there exists the possibility of redemption, if only we dare to trust one another once more.